Let's say we're in the middle of football season and you're at work and somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, did you catch that game over the weekend?" Your immediate response should be, "What game?" Am I right? I mean, we all understand that there are multiple games that took place over the course of the weekend, right? So if you're talking about the Raiders versus the Broncos, and I'm talking about Michigan versus Michigan State, and Bernard over there is talking about an ESPN Classic game, it might sound like we're all talking about the same thing, because we're at least talking about football. But eventually we're going to realize we're not. We do this all the time with matters of faith or when it comes to God. When people mention something like God, we just assume that they're talking about the same thing we are. But the question is, should we? In short, absolutely not. In order to comprehend somebody else's point of view, we need to make sure we're asking the right questions so that we're not missing each other. So that when we talk about things like God, the Holy Spirit, the Bible, Jesus, we need to make sure we're agreeing to the same terminology. The biggest mistake in communication is assuming that it's taken place. After all, are there not other religions and matters of faith that people discuss all the time or think in a pluralistic society like America? Of course there are. So it's all the more important to ask these questions. Because if I go to my neighbor and I say, "Let's talk about Jesus," and my neighbor's like, "I love Jesus," but they're talking about Jesus, one of many gods, or Jesus, the brother to Satan, we're not talking about the same thing. Now, I use those as analogies because that is an actual position of a very well-known faith. So if you've never heard those before, now you know. All that to emphasize, we need to discuss these things when we're having conversations in good faith. I don't want to misunderstand you, and I would hope that you don't want to misunderstand me. You might be like, "Willie, I get it." But that's conversations with people who aren't even Christian. Why are we having this discussion? Here's the thing. Christians aren't immune from this sort of miscommunications. If Christians all simply believe the same thing, then why do we have differences of opinion when it comes to doctrine? Why are there so many different denominations with different standings on different topics? For example, if I'm going to be speaking at a church down the street and I tell you I'm going to be talking about baptism, you shouldn't just let that pass by. You should have a question. Am I talking about paedobaptism or infant baptism to the layperson? Am I talking about believers' baptism? Am I talking about the difference between the two and which one we should accept? Am I talking about baptism of the Holy Spirit? This begs further questions. So if, like in the football analogy, you have no problem asking, "What game?" just as in this one, you should have no problem asking, "Willie, what do you mean by baptism?" And in normal everyday conversation, you should have no problem saying, "What do you mean by God? What do you mean by the Holy Spirit, the Trinity, etc.?" If you've talked to one atheist, you've talked to one atheist. If you've listened to one atheist on the radio or being interviewed on a TV, you've listened to one atheist. If your grandson walks away from the faith, you can't then say, "I can't believe my grandson believes like Richard Dawkins." Your grandson's probably wrestling with a different set of questions. You need to be intentional about being in proximity with him and asking, what is it exactly that you're wrestling with? You can't let another person speak for him just because both of them don't believe in God. If you've never talked with somebody from a different denomination or political persuasion, and I do mean talk to them, I don't mean berate them and tell them how wrong they are or unfriend them on Facebook because they put up a post you disagree with. I mean actually talk to them. You can't just assume that you know what they believe based on what you read or what they've seen on the news. You have to be in proximity, asking questions, and the right questions. It's just as Roger E. Olson said, "Before saying I disagree, be sure you can say, I understand." So now that that's all clear as mud, here's the tougher thing we have to wrestle with. Who's right? I mean, if my preconceived ideas about faith contradict your ideas about faith, how do we determine who is actually correct? Because we can't both be right. We could both be wrong, but we certainly can't both be right. And that's what I'm talking about, Willie. That's why we don't talk about religion or politics. That right there. What? Right where? Are you that rattled about the possibility of offending someone? Or are you that rattled by the idea that you might be wrong? If I'm wrong, I get to wrestle with my flaw, reject it, and embrace more truth. And if I'm right, well then hopefully I have valid reasons for the position that I have, and I can explain it to you in a way that it may persuade you. And if I do, awesome. I've won a brother. But at least I'm trying to listen to you. Why would we want to avoid these conversations? I don't want to be blindly embracing a lie. Do you? I mean, are we that uncomfortable with being uncomfortable? Jesus makes me uncomfortable in the best sort of way. It's never fun, but it's always for the best. And when we challenge one another, we're seeking to grow and learn from one another. Because just as Proverbs says, iron sharpens iron, and one person sharpens another. I would argue we owe this to one another. I mean, are you perfect? I would hope that your answer is going to be no. Am I perfect? Heck no. But I'll take it one step further. Is your favorite Christian pastor or author perfect? No. So somewhere along the way, our understanding and knowledge of God is going to be flawed. But don't panic. We should expect this. How could we ever expect that a finite creature could ever understand an infinite and holy God? We may not fully understand him, but we have enough to talk about and try to learn from one another. If we never challenge these concepts by talking about them with others, at the very least, other brothers and sisters in the faith, how could we ever expect to actually learn and grow? Do you really trust yourself to come to a conclusion all on your own? I know I don't. How then do we decide who's right and who's less right? How do I know that I need to let go of preconceived ideas and deeply entrenched notions of Jesus or the Bible or God if they are indeed wrong? Well, frankly, it's arguments. And no, I don't mean physically assaulting or verbally assaulting one another. I mean a reason or set of reasons given with the aim of persuading others that an action or idea is wrong. Truth has the best arguments. Not always the best advocates, but it should have the most persuasive reasons. But that's why we have to have faith, Willie. We just gotta believe. I'm glad you brought that up. Just because I have faith or believe something is true, does that make it so? Again, if my belief is that there is only one God, but your belief is that there are many gods, who's right? Let's paint a different picture. If I have faith that there is a blue-furred sloth that lives under my bed, he wears a monocle and a top hat, but he only comes out when nobody can see him, does that make it true? Furthermore, is faith really just belief without evidence? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about next time. Given that we're just getting started, we could really use all the help we could get. So, if you find this content or something like it at all helpful, please do like, share, subscribe, spread by word of mouth, all that fun stuff. While you're at it, if you can think of any other ways that we talk past each other, feel free to throw that down below so we can keep the conversation going. And until next time, stay close to God and close to others.